Hello and welcome to Future Proof. I'm Pádraig Floyd and I'm joined today by Mike Ambery, Retirement Savings Director at Standard Life. We're going to be talking about the current reforms to the UK pensions environment and see what lessons we might learn from jurisdictions around the world. So thanks very much for joining me today, Mike.
It's a real pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Great. Well, look, let's start at the beginning. There's an awful lot of reform going on within the UK pensions environment. What's wrong that the government wants to change, and what of their plans do you think will really help to change the situation?
So I think with regard to that, we're simply not saving enough in the DC area in private sector, which are saving in DC pensions. AE, we can argue, since 2012 has been a great success in millions of people that weren't saving, obliged to save. There's people that are outside of that, the self-employed, particular ages and otherwise, that have been looked at for at least 5-6 years now. So we're waiting for that reform to come through. The then next question is, and I know where you're going to come with your next question, but is 8% good enough? We're delighted with where we've got to, but 8% isn't good enough. The expertise around the industry has said for 8% needs to go to 10 to 12 to a higher level. So we're building up pension adequacy. The flip side of that, if we don't get the adequacy, we then are reliant on other things.
Well, okay, you've kind of got a bit of where I'm going with my next question. It was announced at the weekend that Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, has put the next stage of the reforms, on the back burner. Are you suggesting then that adequacy is going to be the thing that gets lost from the reforms, or what other consequences might there be?
First of all, the news at the weekend was disappointing for us experts in the industry. We've been talking about adequacy being a focus of improving the sort of pot size what individuals get at the point of retirement. It's notwithstanding other value for member points that we want to get and greater outcomes for individuals. So making our assets sweat through investments harder and greater level of returns over a period of time. But if levels of contributions are not increased, and we've learnt lessons from overseas, Australia did this back in 1992 with a graduated increase. What's happened there? Get bigger pots at the point of retirement and you're able to utilise them. If we follow through an agenda where we're not doing that, it means other things need to come to the fore. So are individuals now more reliant on state pension because of inadequate savings at the point of retirement? Our analysis has shown by 2040, the level of people was sort of between 6 and 9 million people retiring in 2040 that won't have enough at that point of retirement. So they're reliant on state pension. We've seen the Shadow Chancellor, we've seen others in DWP rumour around removing state triple lock. You can't remove state triple lock if you don't have adequate saving. These other consequences and other factors for me as well, social care, medical care and otherwise, if you can't afford what to do in the point of retirement, you are more reliant on those state benefits as well. So in the round, I think it does sort of bring back to what can people afford at the point of retirement, notwithstanding the main question around that is how long is it delayed for, what period, indefinitely, and then, I mean, the learn from me from Australia, from other areas is graduate increases because you will then take off decisions from other spaces and places.
The government reforms generally, and that's both the current Labour government and the previous Conservative one, if we include Mansion House, which is a precursor to what's being introduced now, they both seek to focus on consolidation. They really want to see fewer, bigger schemes to be regulated because it will be easier, and they see the benefit in economies of scale. But is that the right approach, and how is that going to affect the existing market?
In a nutshell, so I'm a big fan. I believe consolidation is a good idea. We focus on outcomes. It's got to be a move away from driving the market to the very lowest price and considering what outcomes look like. I think size and scale matters. In Australia, those super funds of scale are able to make investments. both domestically and internationally because of their scale. That's not saying they don't carry out the relevant research, which is of course needed, but they're not blindfolded in how they carry out that investment and have the scale to take those investments across the globe, which is that greater investment opportunity, is greater diversification, and leads, in my opinion, to better outcomes from that consolidated mix. The flip side of it is, with a smaller scale, is it possible for the market to achieve the outcomes for members that are required? Such occupational pension schemes that are maybe large, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 billion, won't get to the levels that Rachel Reeves mentioned in Mansion House 2, as I'll refer to it, back in November this year, where we do need to get to that economies of scale to be able to deliver. It's something of the ilk of 25 to 50 billion pounds is the area we need to go to. None of this is mandated at the moment. The flip side of this is, and we've seen it with the current government, if some things aren't happen, then we see mandation. So consolidation helps foster the period of broader investment, which then staves away the need for mandation and facilitating that, because it can be achieved by schemes on scale.
When it comes to scale, we draw comparisons with Australia and Canada. What is it going to take to replicate those successes within the UK environment?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, Australia and Canada are rightly heralded as mature markets. They're mature markets for different reasons. And if I take Australia for an example, 95% of the population is in the DC scheme. DB doesn't hang around. It's really a case that in the UK we can't replicate that particular market because we have DB and a long run of DB and how that is facilitated. We also got DC. So I think in some areas we can take particular learns away from Australia. What are the particular learns? We've spoken about consolidation there. We've seen other things in Australia as well. So tax incentivisation towards domestic equities, whether that's good or bad, or some sort of incentivisation to invest within UK and certain areas of UK, whether that be infrastructure, technology, energy regeneration, I think are key areas we should be looking at. The other things I'll probably say is there's areas both within a Canadian market and an Australian market that aren't perfect, where I think we actually are better in the UK. So I think our engagement in the UK is high. It's supported by our employers. If we go to Australia, employers don't need to take that active involvement. They don't have the consultants over in Australia to help support that. You're in a scheme, you follow that scheme, you're engaged too, and at the point of retirement, you make some decisions, and these may be defaulted decisions at that point of retirement. I'll say within the UK, we're looking currently at default decumulation journeys. I think advice guidance boundary review that came through sort of middle of November, it really helps to facilitate member choices being directed towards targeted support. So there's areas where Australia and Canada, mature schemes, have individuals and consumers that aren't making decisions at the point of retirement. And the defaults, as their regulators will say, are pretty woeful in the introduction of default decumulation journeys. Let's learn. Let's look at their products and propositions. Let's advance them and be able to give those to our customers and populations here. But in the round, say that's at the point of retirement. We really do need to learn from the accumulation side and making sure that we can do certain things like sweating assets and otherwise. We see providers and asset managers take key risks, key investments. We've seen the Canadian schemes look towards UK airports by way of example. We know the Australian already invest in Heathrow, etc., etc. So let's not lose the opportunity through economies of scale and the virtue of looking at private assets properly to give outcome-based return within the UK. Let's just not miss out on those areas.
we did used to have some tax incentives in this country, but you'd be too young to remember those, of course. Um, Now, when it comes to communications and engagement in particular, the Dutch and the Scandinavian models are held up as being ahead of the game, certainly ahead of us. So, not just related to comms and engagement, but what would you take from those particular jurisdictions that we might be able to apply effectively within the UK?
You're too kind. I'm not too young to remember some of these things. I was brought up on Rainbow, so I'll look for the brighter side and some strange characters from different places and spaces, which is, that's not being offensive to Scandinavians and Dutch, but where do I think they've got things right and what are we looking at? Firstly, I think dashboards, a single point of accountability where you can engage with your benefits. I'll link that to the advice guidance boundary review from November time. That's also helping the consumer. So if we can do things linked to dashboard, links to data as providers and as the industry to say, hey, you're not saving enough, maybe consider what an extra contribution would do. B, I think then we should be looking at giving advice. Where should you be invested? How do you want to be invested? And then guide that advice where individuals aren't taking it and to say, you might well consider X, Y, and Z. So giving something to someone on the plate of consuming data and helping support that decision-making process, I think is one thing. And then at the point of retirement, actually aggregating that data with the products and solutions helps facilitate that. Do I think they necessarily do it in those overseas countries? I think Holland, the Dutch, have sort of gone to a CDC type model. They've lessened that CDC type model in the last year as well. So they have lessons to learn in that particular space. I'll go back to one thing on Australia, which is performance tables. I think consumers being able to look at how their funds are performing and then having choice of maybe moving where those funds are for their appetite, their attitude to risk, their attitude to investment will be really key factors. I think equally will segue as much of the Scandinavian and Dutch market are doing, and with the use of AI and other technologies to be able to facilitate where do you want to be, how can you be guided through this, and it wouldn't surprise me that providers and other players in the market start to utilize data from those dashboards that they have in those countries to give future guidance and greater level of engagement going forward.
Thanks. Now, I can't move on without just touching on that point you raised about dashboards, because you say that the Scandinavians and Dutch have done it well, and that clearly is something that we haven't. Are you still hopeful that we may still see dashboards, maybe even the next couple of years, given that we've already seen the second phase of reforms pushed back?
I think we have to be hopeful. I think the Money Helper dashboard as a first piece will give information. I think we're all waiting for commercial dashboards, whether that will be 26, 27. I think if that falls away, we've got something that is information. It would be better to have something that is information combined with probably that advice, guidance, boundary review to then facilitate data being utilized and providing back to customers to then give journeys. There's a current limitation of if you give anyone information, if you gave me information by way of example, I'll take that information and do you know what? I won't know what to do with it. This is the reason why we've got defaults. If you help me out, if you give me the guidance, which I think is around commercial dashboards, that direction, then we generate better consumer behaviours and we give more choice. So I'm hopeful that we do move forward in that direction, but I don't have that crystal ball.
This is something that's taxing me. I mean, adequacy seems to be at the root of any successful program. It doesn't matter where it is in the world. Yet we've been focused far more on value for money and the consolidation piece. You know, why do you think we need to do that? Is it just because at the moment adequacy is just too big a step?
I think adequacy is too big a step, but we also need to do the right thing by the money that we're investing. So it's a bit of an elephant in the room, if you'll allow me to say that. I think within the DC industry, we've really raced to the bottom. I'm less bothered about caps. I don't think anyone really looks at a cap and thinks, "Oh, my default fund is going to touch that cap." Realistically, where it's competitive at all, we should be looking at it in terms of what's our outcome, not what is the lowest cost that we're paying for things. I'll sort of reiterate the previous messages that we've had before. I think we've got to have higher level of contributions to give greater pots, but equally we need to be looking at outcomes at the same point. What's the level of investments? What's the level of investment return? And we should be looking at outcomes rather than that value and that race. And I think the consolidation that can and should occur within the industry will enable us to look at that. Equally, performance measures where we're able to look at it, and something that will bring in power and teeth from regulators to look at value and outcomes would be really helpful. In Australia, if you aren't of size and of scale, and if you're not performing to task over a couple of years, you're out the game. That's based on a regulator that has those powers and the ability to be able to do that. Currently, our regulators, and I'm not being negative towards them at all, don't have that power to be able to look at, if you're not hitting, as Rachel Reeves said, 25, 50 billion, then what's your level of outcome, what's your performance? And if you're not hitting a scale, it will be, so you need to do something about it over a longer period of time, a sort of shaming type mechanism. That to me is very English. It's very nice, it's very polite, but I think we need to get to the point of, well, actually, you're not serving it right. We're not going to drive consumer behaviour to say, oh, my scheme just isn't performing, I'll just go to somewhere else. We need regulator with power to help facilitate, and that's probably the biggest point to take from probably Australia there, of regulator with more power facilitating what I think the Chancellor had said in Mansion House too.
So it seems to me you're suggesting that if we have consolidation at all, it should be of the regulatory authorities.
Totally agree with you. I think a regulator that is combined and aligned does make most sense. In recent engagement with former pensions ministers globally, they will all say having one regulator that is engaged and singing from a same hymn book makes absolute sense.
I can't give you a crystal ball, but I'm going to offer you a magic wand. So if you had a magic wand, or perhaps control of DWP and Treasury, what would you do? What were the few things you'd like to see done in the next couple of years in terms of the reform?
Do you know what? The thing I would like is real roadmap and security. I think where Rachel Reeves came in as Chancellor, she was really clear on a budget. She set out a stall of what's going to happen at what point in time. Where me as an individual, and I think experts within the industry don't like, is not having a roadmap. So adequacy. When a contribution is going to increase? When are we going to change AA reforms? Are we going to get other powers? So just incremental timelines of when can we expect stuff. I'll place dashboards in there. So with my magic wand, and thank you for that gift, I'll probably say just the roadmap that will be really clear, and then we don't, as the industry, waste time thinking and doing otherwise. We know when things are going to come up, and equally the ability. We need to innovate. We still need to push. Just making sure that we can put that in the roadmap and it's not fixed forever.
Okay, well, Mike, well, thanks very much for joining me today.
It's a real pleasure. Thank you.
That just leaves me to thank you for watching. Thank you very much. If you liked it, click like. If you didn't like it, click dislike. If you've got any ideas for topics or interviewees, stick them in the comment section below. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing you on another edition of Future Proof. Goodbye.